The September 11th, 2001 attacks were caused by gun control. How do we know this? Because pilots were forcibly disarmed and defenseless. In the wake of the attacks, GOA fought alongside airline pilots to restore their right to a firearm in the sky. And today we're going to go over how grassroots support and work in Congress helped win this battle and keep the skies safe. Hey guys, I'm Tiffany and you're watching One in the Chamber, the show that helps you become a better gun rights activist. Before we get into this video, I want to encourage all of you to sign up for GOA's alerts. If you click the link below and enter your email, you'll be the first to know about issues affecting you on both your state and federal level. Remember, we're only as effective as our grassroots support, so we need your help to defend the Second Amendment. Making a phone call or sending an email is a fantastic way to get involved, and the best part is that signing up is completely free. So now back to the video. How do we know that the 9/11 attacks were caused by gun control? Well, first off, the attacks took place during the only period in history where pilots were disarmed. Since the dawn of commercial aviation, pilots in the US have been armed. Sometimes flying armed was even a requirement if the plane was carrying US mail. But in 1987, a tragic act of violence by a disgruntled ground crew worker led to the violation of the Second Amendment and pilots were disarmed. Tracy Price, an airline pilot who was pivotal in helping GOA pass the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program into law, recently told the story at our Goals Conference.
So what happened in 1987? On December 7th of 1987, a recently terminated fired former ground ops employee of U.S. Air used his unsurrendered employee ID to bypass security. He boarded flight 1771, service from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and he was illegally carrying a loaded .44 Magnum revolver. The supervisor who had fired him days before regularly took this flight home. And he was on board that flight that day. As the flight cruised at 22,000 feet with 43 souls on board, the fired employee walked to the front of the cabin and shot the flight attendant. He then broke down the cockpit door. The captain, Greg Lindemood, turned around and said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I'm the problem." He then killed both pilots, shot them to death. He then did what we call pulled the control disconnects, and he put the aircraft into a 70-degree, that disconnected the autopilot, by the way, and put the airplane into a 70-degree dive. The last person who was murdered before the airplane hit the ground was Captain Doug Arthur, who was commuting home on that same flight. He ran forward to try to arrest the dive, and he was shot by the only armed person on board. That was, of course, the murderer. The airplane actually exceeded the speed of sound prior to slamming into the hillside in the Santa Lucia Mountains of California. So how did the government respond to this unthinkable attack on innocent people? An attack that almost certainly would not have happened if pilots had been armed. If you're guessing they disarmed pilots, you're right. That's exactly what they did. The FAA went about that by issuing an emergency rule that required airline employees to pass through security screening each time they entered the sterile area of the airport, or the secure side of the airport. The airlines immediately complained and said this was just impossible for their ground ops employees because the ground ops employees had to pass between the secure and the non-secure side of the airport many times each day. So the FAA modified the rule and they said, okay, ground ops employees don't have to go through security screening, but flight crews do. So to drive home the point, when it's all said and done, the new rule says that made it sure that, by the way, that rule remains in effect today, that ground ops employees who, of which the murderer on flight 1771 was one of them, were exempted from screening, but the pilots were required to go through screening, which effectively disarmed them. You can't beat that kind of bureaucratic idiocy. You can't make it up. Among the pilots who chose to carry a gun before 1987 was Captain Victor Saraceni of United Airlines. And he told his wife Ellen at that time that he predicted that this would result in attempted cockpit takeovers. He was tragically correct when his airplane, United Flight 175, crashed into the World Trade Center on September 11th of 2001.
So because of government bureaucracy, pilots were disarmed, and this directly led to the 9/11 attacks. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we at GOA got to work to make sure it would never happen again. We knew gun control was the root cause of the attacks and that we had to rearm pilots. So we worked with Tracy and a team of airline pilots to bring this issue to members of Congress. We also tapped into GOA's grassroots membership. Our members' outpouring of support can be credited with quite a few votes from members of Congress. But don't just take it from us. Listen to what Tracy has to say.
So we knew we had to get the law changed. Myself and a small group of airline pilots that were acquaintances, some and some that I had just met, joined together. And we didn't have any idea what we were doing in Washington, D.C., but we put on our suits and went into town. And we were blessed to become acquainted very early on with John Valleco, who was then the Director of Federal Affairs for the Gun Owners of America. John understood the political climate, and he gave us direction. The GOA activated the Second Amendment community. It's possible some of you were involved in calling and emailing your congressman. We thank you for your activism. One of the things I learned is how much power ordinary citizens have. If you can get 5 phone calls into a congressional office, you've really got their attention. If you get 10, they're really worried. If you can get 50, you almost certainly are going to swing that vote. So if you think about that, 50 citizens, 50 engaged citizens have the ability to pick up the phone and firmly and politely state their views. They can change the course of what's going on in Washington, D.C. We have more power than we think, and we should use it more than we do.
That last statement should really sound familiar to frequent viewers of this channel and this show in particular. We're constantly talking about how our voice really matters in politics. Not only that, but how much your voice as a gun owner matters. Gun owners often feel that their vote doesn't count or that the system is rigged. And this mentality is exactly what the anti-gunners want. They want you to be upset, to not vote, to feel like you don't matter, to opt out. If they can keep you from calling your representative or your senator or anyone who can disrupt their agenda, that's how they win. Because the billionaire-funded gun control lobby does not have grassroots support. It's just well-funded. They can't produce an army of phone calls to representatives or massive amounts of comments on the Federal Register. So instead, they wage lawfare, capture regulators, and work to destroy the Second Amendment from the shadows. But here's the thing. Real, genuine grassroots movements always win out, because that's who our political system is designed to work for. If legislators feel the heat, they see the light. And the fight for arming pilots against Terrorism Act was a tough one. But the key to victory in this case was the support of notable Democrats. With the help of Tracy Price, we were able to convince Senators Barbara Boxer and John Kerry, who were huge gun control advocates, to support this legislation. And all of a sudden, the Bush admin, who had opposed the legislation in favor of DHS funding and the creation of the TSA, was to the left of California Senator Barbara Boxer on a gun issue. After this, other prominent Democrats fell in line as well.
On the particular debate before us, it is the last line of defense, and I believe that pilots should be given something other than the escape rope and the fire axe to defend themselves in the flight deck.
And thanks to our grassroots supporters' help, we passed the Arming Pilots Against Terrorism Act into law in 2002. And of course, there were naysayers, those who thought after pilots were armed, there would be chaos in the skies.
Yes, I don't believe that our pilots should be armed. I would say that I'm not even that comfortable with air marshals being on our planes having been armed. I think the only answer to the issue is to have top-notch security.
I'm totally against it, and I'm horrified at the thought of the pilots having guns. The idea of increasing having guns on the plane is horrible. I think it would entice them to come into the cabin, out of the cockpit, in some heroic mode. I think the job is to fly the plane, maneuver it maybe to protect people, and that's it.
Couple of emails this morning. If pilots start using guns, I think it will only be a matter of time before a gun starts getting used to curb any perceived questionable behavior. The problem will be, how will the passengers contain an overzealous pilot from firing a gun to solve a situation he or she hasn't seen and is overreacting to?
Since then, there hasn't even been an attempted hijacking of an aircraft in the U.S., and the skies are safer than ever.
So pilots have been rearmed for over 22 years. I'm proud that I flew armed for the last 19 years of my 36-year airline flying career. Arming pilots has been proven to be safe and amazingly cost-effective. And September 11th of 2001 was the best day in history if you're a terrorist. And terrorists love to repeat successful methods of attack. Since pilots have been rearmed, nobody's tried this. Nobody tried another 9/11 style attack. If you think that had something to do with TSA screening, well, talk to me later. I'll sell you, I got a good deal on a bridge for you. Well, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you, God, for leading me to GOA and for allowing us to be connected with John Valleco and all of the people at GOA that got airline pilots rearmed. God bless each of you, and God bless our country.
So there you have it. The power of the grassroots support made this possible and secured the skies for safe air travel. Never doubt the power that you have as a gun rights activist. Click the link in the description of this video to sign up for GOA's alerts to continue to help us fight to expand and protect the Second Amendment. Thanks for watching.